Trump also got an assassination attempt recently before he is becoming the president. And there is a kind of fuss around this particular stuff. And especially if we look into the JFK's case, like, a lot of
Mm,
conspiracies, like, some Russian mafia or some sort of, Fidel Castro's goons has did this particular thing. And what do you
hmm
think about that? Like, you have expressed a lot of sound opinions on your shows related to this particular assassination. And what is that
mm.
very much evident? And what do you think about it?
Well, it's funny. The JFK assassination, I like to joke and say it's the gateway drug for conspiracy thinking. Right around, you have to keep in mind at the time, the 1950s had occurred, and we kind of have to go back to the 1920s. There was something called the First Red Scare, where American conservative politicians had a meltdown about communism and started imagining all sorts of terrible things and saying all sorts of ridiculous things. And the John Birch Society was created and all this. And then in the 1950s, you had McCarthyism, where people were actually being blackballed and blacklisted and lost their jobs and their ability to make money, especially in the arts, simply because they knew a guy who espoused semi left wing or ideas that McCarthy thought, ooh, communist. And you think, wow, McCarthy must have been a real patriot, real anti-communist. But the truth of the matter is, I think he was just an opportunist. I think he was another scam artist in a long line of American scam artists who found a way to make money and gain power for himself by whipping up nonsensical narratives that had real world impact. Now, at the end of all this period, after McCarthyism ends, John F. Kennedy is running for president against Richard Nixon, who was Eisenhower's vice president. Kennedy, I mean, now we all go, oh, Kennedy, he was so great. Oh, we love him, Camelot. But a lot of people didn't like Kennedy.
Mhm.
He's very left wing. He's a Catholic in a country that is decidedly Protestant. And people were worried, oh, if he becomes president, what will happen? Will the Pope rule the country? And so on. So a lot of people didn't particularly like him. And then he won, and Nixon lost. And one of the reasons that happened is because it was the first televised presidential debate, and Nixon would not wear makeup because he thought that was fake. And so, as a result, under the hot lights, Nixon just sweated like a criminal being grilled by the police. He looked terrible, and Kennedy looked great. So,
Mhm.
Kennedy won. Everything's going along, immediately, of course, people who were didn't like him started spreading ideas. Oh, he's soft on communism. Whereas if you look at his record, he and especially his brother, not soft on communism at all. One of the closest times we ever came to nuclear war was the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was under his watch, because he was like, no, Soviet Union, you're not putting nuclear missiles in Cuba. Meh. Then he gets killed near the end of his term. And almost immediately, ideas started to float out there in the pre-internet world of like, that's weird, because we don't actually have a lot of assassinations in America. We had Lincoln, we had a couple others. There were a couple of assassination attempts, but it doesn't actually happen that much, surprisingly, for a country that likes guns as much as America does. So immediately people started questioning, who killed him? This guy? This clown who apparently one of the things he did after shooting the president was he wandered around and then he shot a policeman because he panicked and then he went to the movies where he was caught. This seems very suspicious. And so people started to really run with this. And before you knew it, within a year, you started having books being published about how, ooh, no, some things don't match up and the magic bullet and all. And so it was this real um, sort of cultural zeitgeist on the left of no way this guy Oswald killed him. And this was mainly a left wing thing. And in fact, conspiracy thinking was primarily a left wing hobby. It was
Mhm.
not the conspiracy stuff on the right was always communism, 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 godless communists. They're coming to eat your babies. But on the left, they would come up with these complicated narratives, very often starting with Kennedy, because the idea is okay, if I look at all the quote unquote evidence and I think, something is weird here, this doesn't add up. The Warren Commission report's not true. So that means if that's not true and that's the official report, that means they're covering it up and they are the government. And if they're covering up the death of a president, what else are they covering up? And that's how the conspiracy ecosystem that we have today really kind of got started, essentially. And then
Yeah.
after that, of course, there's Jim Garrison. And Jim Garrison was the district attorney for New Orleans. And he really decided to hop on this. I'm going to solve the crime of the century, he said to himself and his people. And he was ruthless, and he really went after people's whole lives to try and destroy them. And that becomes the basis of the Oliver Stone book, the Oliver Stone movie, excuse me, JFK, which was very clever in the way that it mixes documentary type style of filmmaking along with the classic tropes and methodologies of um, normal fiction storytelling, and kind of blurs the lines between the two. And a lot of people were like, yeah, that's the real story. But not according to a guy I've had on my podcast 3 times, Fred Litwin, who this is all he does. He just researches JFK conspiracy theories, especially Jim Garrison, and he keeps writing. He's written 3 books now about how Garrison was full of crap. And he was a ruthless person, power hungry, maybe insane. And he nonetheless had, again, very real world implications. He destroyed people's lives with his ridiculous allegations that he had no factual basis for at all. And yet, that by then, there were so many people who were like, yeah, something is fishy here. Oliver Stone is obviously one of them. That, that's it. There are people out there today, plenty of people who would not consider themselves conspiracy people who still go, well, except for JFK. Like that was totally, that was a hit job. And then who killed him, as you mentioned, could be whoever you hate, the government, the communists, Castro, the Jews, the CIA, the New World Order, aliens. There are literally people who say he was killed by a gas propelled gun of alien manufacture by his driver, who was in fact an alien disguised as a human being. So, it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving.
Mhm, mhm. So there is a conspiracy around the JFK assassination. Is like it's about aliens as well, right? Like but
Oh,
do you
yeah.
really think this Oswald is like that this little guy he got a
Yeah.
real motive behind killing somebody like a president? Do you really
You
feel like?
know, Well, when I first, when I was younger, I also thought, that seems weird. How did that bullet end up on the stretcher? The supposedly the scope on the rifle that he used was improperly mounted, and so how is that possible? It's also very, very hard to get off those 3 shots with that kind of a bolt action rifle in that short period of time at a moving target at a strange angle. And this guy wasn't particularly known to be a great sharpshooter and blah blah blah. And so I thought, yeah, probably something is hinky with JFK's assassination, until you actually look into it. When I was first approached by Fred Litwin for my 50th episode to come on my podcast, I was kind of a little bit of at least a semi believer. And then I started looking into that. I was like, well, let's talk about the proofs, the umbrella man and the shots people heard and all these things. And it turns out that if you actually go to the actual records, which are all online, you can just look them up. It's free. Yeah, actually, there is a very good case for Lee Harvey Oswald as the sole person. And I mean, we could talk about this for 19 hours and never get through all the details. But yeah, there is a very good case that Lee Harvey Oswald is the sole shooter, and he did it because he was a little weirdo. He wanted to be important. He wanted to be famous. He was trying to show off to some people he kind of sort of knew, but he was a loner. He was a loner. He was abusive to his wife. Um, and he had constantly been trying to find himself, and he thought, this is the way I'm going to do it. And it worked because we all know Lee Harvey Oswald. And every time now there's some kind of shooting or something like that, you'll notice we always use the person's middle name because of Lee Harvey Oswald. So that name has stuck in our heads, and now we don't say Derek DeWitt, we say Derek John Michael DeWitt did this because we got to use the person's full name for some reason, and that all started with Oswald and Kennedy. So yeah, I think Oswald is the sole shooter, and he did it because he was a little nut, and it's just one of those crazy things that, wow, the president got killed. Heck, because no one thought it would happen, especially there. Someone's going to shoot from the fifth floor of the book depository. It seems weird. So yeah, I personally, I am now convinced that it's just Oswald.
So, which episode of your show is basically giving a lot of evidence regarding this, where people can go and look into? Which episode
So
of
that's
your?
it's episode 50 was the first one called the JFK Assassination Biggins. Then there was a follow-up, episode 79, about Mr. Litwin's next book, Film Flam, which specifically looks at the JFK movie by Oliver Stone, which is about Jim Garrison. And we talk about more of the supposed proofs and discounting them. And then we just recently did episode 123 about his next book, A Heritage of Nonsense, because he collects these stories, and he's great stories of people around Garrison, and he makes a very good case in there for, yeah, Garrison was a power hungry, ruthless jerk and not a nice guy. He's not Kevin Costner, everybody's dad, like in the movie, who's just, I just want to find the truth. No, he is a ruthless, power hungry jerk who doesn't care whose lives he ruins. And he creates this atmosphere at the DA's office in New Orleans where he starts attracting all these lunatics. He has a guy come up to him who says, I'm a psychic and and a medium, and I have communicated with the ghost of Lee Harvey Oswald, who, by the way, was also my homosexual lover when he was alive. And you're just like, oh, who are these people who come out of the woodwork for this? Because there's a lot of fame attached to this, and I think these people are excited. They're like, wow, maybe I can become famous and maybe leverage that and turn that into speaking engagements or a book or some kind of profit. Or maybe for them the fame is enough. I don't know because I'm not crazy and I'm not power hungry. So I don't know why they do it.
Yeah, but I also have had a look into the birth chart of JFK basically. Maybe we can do it later. I know that you don't believe all these things, and you just say that all these stuffs are like, yeah, there might be some reasons to peoples to believe it's other way around, or a straight way around, or whatever the way
Mm,
they feel like. They have a lot of reasons to that. Like maybe if
sure.
yeah, maybe we can do it later. I mean, it will itself will take a lot of time to analyze the chart. So, like, let's,
Yeah, it's a long thing, but
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but the thing to keep in mind on Podbean, which is where my podcast is
Mm.
hosted, I always in the episode notes I have a series of links. So for people who want to, like, the magic bullet, it turns out yes, there is a reason for it. What about this guy? What about this
Mhm.
proof? This proof? This proof? Proof. So it's easy. People can just click and go, oh, I'm interested in this one. Click, and you can go to the actual online government archives and see what they say. And what they say actually makes sense. And then
Mhm,
you
mhm,
go,
mhm,
oh, oh, okay. I thought that was weird. It turns out it's not that weird.
mhm, mhm,
you know, I didn't know because guess what? I'm not a ballistics expert.
mhm,
So
mhm.
why would I know? I mean, we say this is the thing we do is we all think we're so smart and we think, well, common sense is not common. Common sense is also very often not sense. we think, we used to think the sun went around the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was common sense. And people who said, no, no, actually, that's not how it is. I mean, they got themselves in trouble. Galileo was arrested and put in house arrest for years as a result of his findings. So, uh, I understand why people might want to hang on to that,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no need to because the evidence is out there and it's all free on the internet. Just go look it up. And
Mm-hmm.
by look it up, I mean don't watch some JFK was killed by the alien Jew Illuminati
Mm-hmm.
video on YouTube. That's not proof. Go to the actual archives and the actual records and see what is actually true, and then make up your own mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when we're like